Well, let's bring our guest now in. Christophe Bluth is Professor of International Relations at the University of Bradford and a specialist in nuclear weapons policy. So we're hearing that the talks have come to an end. We're waiting now for the result, for a declaration. Do you have any inside info?
Good afternoon. I don't have inside information, I have to admit, but it is quite clear what the situation is, which is that the Iranians are pushing very hard to get certain conditions met fairly well up front. These include, first of all, they want compensation for the United States having left talks in the first place, and all the suffering that has been imposed on Iran due to the sanctions imposed by the Trump administration. And then they want all of the sanctions to be lifted against all 1,500 individuals and business affected. They want to guarantee that European countries, China and Russia, can do proper business with Iran in the future. And they want this assurance that the United States will never leave this agreement again.
What kind of adjustments might be made to sanctions? What do you think could be in the declaration?
Well, Joe Biden has indicated that sanctions lifting might be possible, but not until an agreement is actually reached. So the United States is not prepared to do an upfront payment, so to speak, in terms of any gesture, sanctions lifting. The United States also is not prepared to give compensation of any kind for the United States having left the agreement in the first place. And moreover, an American president cannot bind a future president. So although Biden wants to say we will stick to the agreement, he can't give guarantees for a future president.
What role do you think Russia and China could play in any agreement that comes out of these talks?
Well, Russia and China are extremely anxious, first of all, that Iran should never build a nuclear weapon. And secondly, that Iran remains in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, because if Iran decides to abandon the Non-Proliferation Treaty, then Russia cannot do any nuclear business with Iran anymore. And Iran is in charge, Russia is in charge of the Iranian supply for the Bushehr civil nuclear reactor. So that would hit Russia and it would hit Iran hard too. And China is buying oil from Iran, and so the sanctions are problematic for China's relationship. So China and Russia will try to push Iran on the basis of being trusted partners of Iran, that they should modify some of their conditions, perhaps. They certainly have to modify some conditions, because as they stand now, this won't make any progress.
Well, we're hearing about Israel saying that they are worried that Iran is trying to blackmail the member or the participating countries. Are they alone in that? I mean, what's the big picture?
Well, the Americans are fully aware of the fact that the Iranians are increasing their stockpile of highly enriched uranium as a kind of tool of pressure. So you could call it blackmail, certainly. It doesn't mean that Iran is prepared to actually go the whole way to construct and test a nuclear weapon. That would be a step too far. And the Americans say if that ever happens, then there can't be an agreement, because then the agreement would be dead forever. Which is also implausible, actually, because some countries have given up nuclear weapons. So it doesn't mean that this is correct. But nevertheless, yes, the Iranians are putting a lot of pressure because they think they have tools of pressure. But I think the Americans have very clear red lines which they're not willing to cross.
Clear red lines. Well, Christophe Bluth at the University of Bradford, thank you very much for your insight.